All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to unpack a really significant Supreme Court judgment. It's all about this tricky financial concept that, believe it or not, has been quietly affecting electricity bills for millions of people. It's a fascinating story, really, about how a well-intentioned promise to keep your power bills low ended up creating this massive, multi-billion-dollar headache. So, here's our game plan. We'll start with the jaw-dropping number that got this whole case started. Then, we'll get into what this asset thing even is. We'll hear from both sides of the fight, the companies and the regulator. After that, we'll really dig into what the court said and why. And finally, we'll look at the new rules that have come out of this and what it all means going forward. Okay, so let's set the scene. This whole thing kicks off in Delhi's power sector with a financial puzzle. And we're talking about a puzzle so big, so tangled, that it took the Supreme Court of India to finally figure it out. Just look at that number. Over 27,000 crores. Let that sink in for a moment. And just to be crystal clear, this isn't profit, not even close. It's a gigantic unrecovered cost. Think of it like a massive IOU owed to Delhi's power companies, the discoms as we call them. A debt that just kept growing and growing for almost 20 years, right? So when you see a number that big, the immediate question is, what on earth is a regulatory asset? And how in the world did this one financial instrument become the main event in a huge Supreme Court battle? To really get what the court decided, we first need to wrap our heads around this core concept. When you hear the word asset, you probably think of something physical, right? Like a power plant or a transformer. But a regulatory asset isn't like that at all. It's more like a promise, a financial promise of money that's supposed to be paid back later.
Let me break it down. Imagine the cost of supplying electricity suddenly shoots up. Maybe coal gets way more expensive. Now the regulator could just pass that entire cost on to you, and your bill would skyrocket. But to avoid what they call a tariff shock, they decide to keep your bill artificially low for now. So what happens to that gap? That difference between the real cost and what you're actually paying? Well, that gets recorded as a regulatory asset. It's basically an IOU from all of us, the consumers, to the power company. And the catch is, it comes with interest, what they call a carrying cost, which also has to be paid back eventually.
So you see, the whole mechanism actually starts from a good place, protecting people like you and me from sudden, massive hikes in our electricity bills. The regulator creates this asset, hoping to smooth things out and recover the money slowly over time. But here's the kicker. That deferred amount doesn't just sit there. It collects interest year after year. And guess who ends up paying for the original amount and all that accumulated interest? Yeah, the consumer. And in Delhi, this wasn't just some theoretical problem. It was a real-life snowball effect. It started small, a somewhat manageable 696 crores back in 2004. But then it just exploded. By 2013, it was already over 11,000 crores, and if you fast forward to 2024, you get that mind-boggling 27,000 crore figure. What was supposed to be a short-term fix had morphed into a long-term, totally unmanageable crisis.
So, naturally, with a problem this huge, it was only a matter of time before it landed in court. This wasn't just about accounting anymore. It was a full-blown legal confrontation. On one side, the power companies, and on the other, the regulator responsible for setting the prices.
Okay, so let's look at the core arguments, the contentions of both parties. The discoms, the power companies, were essentially saying, look, the tariffs are way too low. We can't recover our basic costs, and it's threatening to put us out of business. The regulator isn't following the rules. But the regulator, the DERC, fired back. They said, hey, we were facing an unprecedented 80% hike in power costs. We were trying to protect consumers. And here's the interesting part. They also pointed out that the discoms themselves had originally suggested using this mechanism. So with these two very different stories, how did the Supreme Court cut through all the noise? Well, they did what good judges do. They went back to first principles. They went right to the source code, the Electricity Act of 2003, to figure out what the law actually intended. And the court's observation was, let's just say, they didn't mince words. This quote right here says it all. The court called this situation, this huge, long-pending asset, a clear and simple regulatory failure.
That's a powerful statement. The court was basically saying that the system designed to balance everyone's interests had fundamentally broken down. The judges really zeroed in on Section 61 of the Electricity Act. They reminded everyone of the basic rules for setting tariffs. It's not just about keeping prices low. The law is clear. Tariffs must be based on commercial principles, they must safeguard consumer interests, and allow for reasonable cost recovery. And they have to progressively reflect the true cost of supply. The court's finding was that in Delhi, this delicate balancing act had completely failed. The scales had been tipped in one direction for far too long. But this judgment wasn't just about looking back and pointing fingers. No, the court was determined to fix this for the future. And its ruling was massively strengthened by a brand new, powerful rule from the central government. A rule designed to make sure a crisis like this never happens again. And this right here is the game changer, Rule 23. The court made a big point of referencing it. It basically puts regulatory assets in a financial straitjacket. Look at this. From now on, they can only be created under extreme circumstances, like a natural disaster. They can't be more than 3% of a company's annual revenue, and they have to be paid off fast, in a maximum of 3 years. The message is loud and clear. The era of these open-ended, ballooning debts is over.
So, after all the analysis, all the arguments, what was the final verdict? Well, the Supreme Court didn't just issue a judgment. It laid out a clear, decisive, and frankly, very bold plan of action.
Here it is, the court's 4-part plan. Step 1, that massive 27,000 crore asset in Delhi, it has to be cleared within a maximum of 4 years. Step 2, the Delhi regulator has to create a detailed roadmap to make that happen. Step 3, any future assets anywhere in the country have to follow the strict new Rule 23. And Step 4, the court ordered the Appellate Tribunal, APTEL, to act as a watchdog and make sure these rules are followed by everyone. This is huge for accountability.
In fact, the court distilled its entire philosophy down into what it called 10 sutras, or core principles. The message is unmistakable. Electricity is a public good. Huge, lingering assets are a sign of failure. Regulators must be independent and accountable. And the Appellate Tribunal now has the teeth to make sure they are. So this judgment forces discipline and accountability onto the entire power sector. It's a landmark decision, no doubt. But it leaves us with one crucial final question. Is this really the end of hidden costs? Will the price we pay for electricity finally reflect what it's truly worth without these massive debts piling up in the background? The Supreme Court has drawn a very clear line in the sand. Now it's up to the system to follow it.